This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former Secretary of State, former Attorney General Rufus Edmisten, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, Syndicated columnist John Hood, and after too long an absence, Henry Hinton, host of Talk of the Town in Eastern North Carolina. Welcome back.
Good to be here.
We have an interesting show for you this week as we focus on the primary elections to be held Tuesday. We want to ask our panelists about the races, the candidates, and the issues. In stark contrast to what we've witnessed in the presidential nominations, the primaries have been relatively quiet and non-confrontational in North Carolina. John, until this past week, there was very little advertising, appearances, and media attention paid to these elections. Are you surprised?
Well, if you'd asked me a year ago, if you'd told me a year ago that this is where we'd be, I'd have been very surprised. But in the last several months, it's been obvious that the presidential race on the Republican side has turned out to be so unpredictable on a week-to-week basis that a lot of the campaigns simply weren't planning far ahead. Wisely, as a number of them have dropped out, so they would have been foolish to buy time. And then on the Democratic side, again, there were assumptions that didn't prove to be true, and only now is North Carolina becoming obviously important for Democrats and Republicans.
We've had a lot of news about court decisions that have taken place, particularly regarding voter ID, the congressional primaries. One of them that came most recently, Rufus, regarded judicial retention elections, and the three-judge panel of the Superior Court said it's unconstitutional. What's going to happen there?
Yeah, those brave souls.
Yeah.
What's going to happen is that they need to read the Constitution again. It's not going to be on the ballot. It'll be later on. And in my opinion, when the Constitution says you shall elect a Supreme Court justice, it means parties together, not retained. If they want to change it, they're going to have to do it the right way, which is through a constitutional amendment.
Henry, one of the things that's interesting about this is that the legislature also decided, when they passed the new districts, they were going to completely eliminate runoff elections. What kind of impact is that having in this process?
I think it's going to have a huge impact. You know, they've moved the congressional races to June, but just down in Eastern North Carolina with the Walter Jones congressional race, there are 3 Republican candidates in that race. And, you know, Walter Jones, of course, is the incumbent. Taylor Griffin and Phil Law are the challengers. It was very close last time between Taylor Griffin and Walter Jones. The third candidate being in that race, I think Walter Jones is going to benefit from that because I don't know if he would get 40% or not.
Chris, the early voting reports, which ended just this past Friday, show a very brisk turnout of early voters. What does that tell us? What can we expect?
I think it's a presidential year. John mentioned it's a very unusual presidential year. I do think there are people who don't normally vote who are showing up because of all the attention the presidential race is getting. The worry, of course, is that some of these down ballot races people still really haven't engaged in and don't know who these people are because they're spending so much time watching the presidential escapades.
Well, I want to get into this presidential primary. This has been a wild and woolly event on both sides of the aisle politically. We finally started seeing some presidential candidates appearing in North Carolina this past. John, is it too little, too late for North Carolina to play a role?
No, actually, North Carolina is going to end up playing a role. It's not going to be the main story on March 15th because you've got 2 winner-take-all primaries, Ohio and Florida, lots of delegates at stake on the Republican side in a race that's still unsettled. And really the candidacies of John Kasich and Marco Rubio interrelated to those 2 states. However, Illinois, Missouri, and North Carolina, all of which have primaries on March 15th, have some form of proportional representation or proportional allocation of delegates. What that means is that specifically on the Republican side, Ted Cruz hopes to gain some delegates in North Carolina that's going to come in handy as he tries to keep Trump from getting to the magic 1237.
Chris, both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton believe that after Tuesday's elections, because there are a number of states that are going to be voting along with North Carolina, we've got Ohio, Florida, Illinois, and so forth. This will be the knockout punch that gives Trump and Clinton the nominations. You believe that?
Well, I think if they perform, if they do very well and win most of these races, especially if Trump wins Ohio and Florida, it's hard to imagine. It's not impossible, but it's hard to imagine him not being the nominee. And I think the same goes for Hillary Clinton. So a lot of it depends on how these races turn out. And a lot of things could happen in a day or 2 days or 3 days that we haven't even thought about.
Let's look at the U.S. Senate race. Henry, obviously, incumbent Richard Burr has 3 other challengers on the Republican side, the most notable of which is Greg Brannon, who gave Tom Tillis quite a run a couple of years ago. You looking for any excitement there, or do you think this is just going to be a laydown for Burr?
I don't think it's going to be a laydown for Burr, because I think, you know, it's a race that could well be impacted by what happens in the presidential race. If the Trump people come out in droves, you got to wonder where they are with regard to Richard Burr and Greg Brannon. Brannon had some name ID because of the run 2 years ago against Tom Tillis.
Right.
And he's traveled the state quite well. You know, it's funny, Richard Burr never has high name recognition or high highs, but he normally does pretty well in the election.
On the Democratic side of this nomination, everybody just assumes that Deborah Ross is going to get the nomination over there. Do you see anything close on that particular race? She's running against Chris Wray, who is a good, strong candidate, Ernie Reeves and Kevin Griffin.
I would think that Chris Wray is a very prominent mayor of North Carolina. And obviously, the quote establishment Democratic Party is very much for Deborah Ross, and I would expect her to take that very easily.
We've done a lot of talking on NC Spin, particularly last week, about the Connect NC bonds and an undercurrent that has been going on there. Some recent polls that were released this past week show that they have very high favorable ratings in poll numbers. Will the bonds get passed? Anybody think they won't get passed?
Well, I'm going to say this. When you have people this silent about something, you better watch out. And as John said about the presidential race, a lot of Trump people coming out, the people I've met here for Trump tend to want to say no to things. And you got to watch it when you don't have very much going on in opposition, because there's always a stealth movement back there somewhere.
Very quickly,
so they pour it on real heavy.
Very quickly, I want to go through. We've got 4 Court of Appeals races since we're not having the Supreme Court race. Richard Dietz is running to retain his seat against Vince Rozier. Any comment on that?
Yeah, Vince Rozier is a very bright young man who's been a district court judge here in Wake County. He's bright. He's worked hard. And you never know, he might just win.
How about Robert Hunter's seat? He's running against Abe Jones, who's run before, John.
I think Hunter probably has the edge there because he's known statewide.
All right.
There's another Hunter at one time, too. So
yes, I remember. Bobby Hunter.
Right.
Linda Stevens is running against Phil Berger Jr. What do we expect there?
Yeah, this is a fascinating race. Phil Berger Jr. obviously ran for Congress, so he has a lot of support in that area, but Linda Stevens is very popular. I think this will be close, but I expect Stevens will win.
And Henry Valerie Zachary is running against Ricky McCoy Mitchell. Any noise on that?
Mitchell is the challenger out of Charlotte, a little bit more conservative, really kind of coming from the Tea Party angle, and that's what she's got to worry about.
All right, we're going to pick up this and go with down ballot races, but we thank you for watching NC Spin on the air or on YouTube. Here's a reminder, there's much more on our website, ncspin.com or NC Spin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and my weekly column. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com or NCSpin on Facebook or on Twitter at NCSpinTweets. Back with more elections after these messages.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
I've devoted my life to public safety. That's why I back Buck.
We need a strong Attorney General. That's why I back Buck.
I want someone that protects our freedom, and that's why I back Buck.
In the upcoming Republican primary, back Buck. Buck Newton for Attorney General.
Let's prepare our state for the future by supporting the Connect NC bond. The bond will fund smart investments in education, agriculture, state parks, our National Guard, and infrastructure projects, creating job opportunities, strengthening our workforce, and driving innovation. It's a timely investment and a smart one for North Carolina families. On March 15th, stand with Farm Bureau and vote for the Connect NC bond.
We now return to NC Spin.
While the main attention's been paid to the elections at the top of the ballot, there's some important elections down ballot on our state. I want to ask our panelists, what elections will you be paying attention to Tuesday night, and tell us why. Rufus, I'll start with you.
I'll be paying attention, of course, to the Attorney General's race, Tom, because I've served there 10 years, and it's amazing to me that the Republican candidates for Attorney General are running against Washington. That is not what you run for Attorney General.
All right, so we got Democrats Josh Stein, Marcus Williams, and Republicans Buck Newton and Jim O'Neill. Who do you expect to come out of that?
Well, on the Republican primary, that was a dead heat, and they're both running against Washington and Obama, and he's about ready to leave.
How about the Democrats?
The Democrats, Josh Stein will be overwhelmingly. He's very talented.
Chris, which race are you going to be following?
Well, I'm interested in the state treasurer's race, where a former NC Spin panelist, Stan Blue III, is running against Ron Elmer, and it's a very contested state primary in the Democratic side. NCAE has endorsed Stan Blue III. State employees have endorsed Ron Elmer.
So did the Charlotte Observer.
I think that'll be a very close race, and the winner of that faces Dale Falwell, a former legislator and former candidate for lieutenant governor.
All right. John, which race will you be watching?
I'll look at the Republican primary for state superintendent. There are three races, three candidates, I should say. Rosemary Stein, who is a physician, who's running a very strong conservative candidacy. Wes Sills, who's a teacher from Harnett County, and Mark Edwards, who's a Board of Education member in Forsyth County and also a former teacher. Very competitive primary, a lot of discussion of Common Core, school choice, and other issues. It'll be very interesting.
Henry?
I've got a particular interest in the Commissioner of Insurance race. A good friend of mine, and full disclosure, Joe McLaughlin, not only friend but co-worker, because he actually was a morning show radio host on one of our radio stations down in Jacksonville on 96.3 FM, and he's gained a lot of momentum from that, and he is the only elected, for anybody in this race that's actually been an elected official. He served as an Onslow County commissioner. He's a former military guy. He works in the insurance industry, and I think Joe's going to actually do very well.
Tom, I misspoke on the state superintendent. I meant Mark Johnson.
Mark Johnson.
Who's the other candidate, the school board member. And I also want to mention the lieutenant governor's race.
Yes.
Very important on the Democratic side.
To do that.
In particular, there's a competitive primary. Holly Jones, who's a Asheville and Buncombe County official, been elected in both places, running against Linda Coleman and three other candidates, but I think Coleman is the strongest
of
the
Coleman's
candidate.
Second attempt.
Coleman was the nominee 4 years ago.
And very close.
Former state rep. And so this is a very competitive primary on the Democratic side.
All right. We've got contested primaries in the Secretary of State race, running against Elaine Marshall, who runs unopposed, A.J. Dowd and Mike LaPaglia. Chris, any chatter about that race?
Well, there's a lot of chatter in the Republican Party, although I'm not sure who's going to win.
Well, the AG, whatever his name is.
A.J. Dowd.
L.J. Dowd.
Okay, I'm sorry. Has run before.
And he's very active. I can tell you, he's been traveling the state and working hard.
And the Commissioner of Agriculture's race, some interesting things there. My understanding is you can't run for Commissioner of Agriculture if you're not a farmer. And yet, a couple of the candidates that are running in that race supposedly are not, according to Steve Troxler.
That's a dopey rule, but if it's the rule, it's the rule. And also, as I understand it, the main issue is gun control.
At the state fair, right? Guns at the state fair.
The agriculture commissioner race, always the top of everyone's list.
All right, and Wayne Causey is making his perennial race for Commissioner of Insurance. Henry's already talked about that. Any particular noise about that race?
I mentioned Joe McLaughlin, who has never run for statewide office before, but the only person in the race who's held an elected office as a county commissioner. Mike Causey, I believe, is his third run for this. And I think Joe's going to give him a run for his money.
Well, the incumbent Wayne Goodwin, he sure runs.
How about the Commissioner of Labor's race? Cherie Berry's running unopposed, but you got Charles Meeker and Maisie Ferguson running in that. Meeker, the former mayor of Raleigh.
Yeah, I think Meeker's clearly the candidate that's going to come out of the primary, and it'll be a very interesting general election.
What's going to happen in the legislature? We'll find out from our panelists after these messages.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
I want an attorney general that supports law enforcement, and that's why I back Buck.
North Carolina needs leaders. That's why I back Buck.
I believe in the Second Amendment, and that's why I back Buck.
In the upcoming Republican primary, back Buck. Buck Newton for Attorney General.
Connect NC, a bond initiative that makes vital investments in North Carolina without raising taxes.
Connect NC is about investing in our future.
It will create better job training opportunities for the 21st century.
It will make our state safer and better prepared.
It invests in North Carolina's community colleges and our future.
And expand cutting-edge research to strengthen our ag community.
All without raising taxes.
No tax increases.
Please join me in supporting Connect NC.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
Connect NC, a bond initiative that makes vital investments in North Carolina without raising taxes.
Connect NC is about investing in our future.
It will create better job training opportunities for the 21st century.
It will make our state safer and better prepared.
It invests in North Carolina's community colleges and our future.
And expand cutting-edge research to strengthen our ag community.
All without raising taxes.
No tax increases.
Please join me in supporting Connect NC.
We now return to NC Spin.
And we're continuing our soup to nuts countdown on Tuesday's elections. Of course, there won't be any congressional primaries. They'll be held in June. But also on the ballot next week are primaries for our legislative candidates. And as you know, Republicans hold veto-proof majorities in both houses of the General Assembly. But there are a lot of vacancies that can make this year's primary elections interesting. We want our panelists to tell you what races they're following. John, you're primarily focused on Charlotte and the western part of the state. What are some of the races there that you're going to be looking at?
Well, I'm particularly focused on races where current members are stepping down, they're retiring, and these will be open seats. 2 Senate races of interest, at least. North Carolina Senate District 45, which is in the northwest part of the state, Dan Suchek's district, centered on Watauga County. He's endorsed Deanna Ballard in the Republican primary, who actually shares an employer with him, Samaritan's Purse. She used to work for First Lady Laura Bush. The opponent is Ken Boehm, who is head of the community college in Caldwell County. The other district is Senate District 48, Tom Apodaca's seat. He has endorsed Chuck Edwards, a businessman in Hendersonville. But Lisa Baldwin, who's a former school board member in Buncombe County, is running, very conservative candidate, running on against Common Core, among other things. And Dennis Justice, who's an interesting Republican, running on an agenda that includes gay rights and medical marijuana. Then there are several seats in the House, a couple in Charlotte, Tricia Cotham's seat, District 100, and District 105, which is Jackie Schaefer's seat. These are both representatives who are retiring. The Democratic primary in District 100 in Charlotte has 2 city council members, one current, one former. Billy Madeline, the former, and John Autry, the current, running on traditional liberal Democratic issues. And in 105, it's a Republican district. Scott Stone, a multiple-time mayoral candidate, very conservative, running against Tim Morgan, a school board member, a former school board member in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, who's more of a moderate. And then out west, you've got a couple of seats that are being vacated. House District 120, the furthest west district. Roger West literally is the current representative. He's stepping down, and he has endorsed Kevin Corbin, who's a longtime school board member and county commissioner there in the western part of the state. The opponent is Elliot Southworth, who's calling Corbin a career politician. Interestingly there, Corbin is in favor of the Connect NC bonds. Elliot Southworth is against the Connect NC bonds. That's been an interesting issue. And then House District 113, which is Henderson and Polk and Transylvania, Whitmire is stepping down. And you've got Cody Henson, who's a young man, a Marine Corps reservist, and Cody James Ferguson, who's a realtor. Both of these men have military experience in that district. And then finally, in Buncombe County, John Ager is the Democratic incumbent. In House District 115, there's a spirited primary on the Republican side, Frank Moretz and Bob Chilmonic. hoping to get that nomination.
Henry, you've been, since you live down east, you've been kind of following the legislative races down east. What are some of them that you're going to be watching?
Well, starting out way out on the coast, on the Outer Banks, District 6, this is the Paul Tyne seat. You remember Paul Tyne was a Democrat. Right. He left the Democratic
Party.
Before
he became a Republican?
Well, he actually went an independent, started caucusing with the Republicans, and of course he knew not to run again. This is an interesting race. You got Beverly Boswell from Dare County running against Ashley Woodard in the Republican primary. Ashley has run for Congress before. This is his first time for the legislature. Former legislator Arthur Williams is going to be on the ballot there, but I was told today, actually, that Arthur Williams has pulled out of that race. That's the Republican side of that Paul Tyne seat. Interesting race on the Democratic primary for that. You've got two Dare County people, Warren Judge and Judy Justice. So, Mr. Attorney General, it's Justice versus Judge.
All right, keep moving.
Okay, go.
Got to move quicker here. I'm sorry.
In the Rick Catlin seat down in Wilmington, New Hanover County, this is House District 20. You've got a former school board member, Tammy Koval, and a staunch Republican, West Point graduate, Holly Grange, running in the Republican primary. There's no Democratic primary in that one. The Buck Newton seat,
Senate District 11.
Senate District 11. You've got two Republicans. You've got Rick Horner from Wilson County. You've got Benton Sawry from Johnston County. House 27 up in Northampton County, Michael Ray versus Franklin Williams in the Democratic primary. That's a rematch of 14. This is an interesting primary in my area, House District 24, Wilson and Pitt County. Jean Farmer Butterfield, the former wife of G.K. Butterfield, the congressman, is the incumbent, but she is being challenged by the mayor pro tem of Greenville, good friend of mine, Candy Smith. You'll have two African-American women running. That's the first time Pitt County has put up a real credible fight in that, and I predict that Candy Smith's going to win that. And then finally, in House District 9, this was the Brian Brown seat. You remember Brian Brown resigned, and Greg Murphy from Greenville was appointed to that seat. There is a Democratic primary to see who's going to run against Murphy in the fall. Young man, 26-year-old Democrat Brian Farkas, who is an architect, and Walter Gaskins, who's a former Pitt County school board member.
All right. Rufus, tell us some of the seats you're watching.
Well, let me get my Dollar Tree designer glasses on here. There's an incumbent named Ben Clark down in Spring Lake. He's been there 3 terms, and he is opposed by a Dr. Naveed Aziz, and she's done a spirited campaign. And then I think you've got the incumbent Frank Eiler. He was opposed last time by a man named Marion Davis. And what I want to point out is that this is the funniest time I've ever seen in my life. In Republican primaries, it's who can out-conservative the other one, and in Democratic primaries, who can be more liberal. And so what we're doing is building parties that are wider and wider apart, not good for democracy.
Interesting. All right, Chris, let's get you started on the districts that you're watching in Raleigh and Wake County and mostly in the Piedmont. We may have to interrupt you with a break here, but let's do that.
One of the most interesting races is Senate District 16 in Wake County. That's the seat currently held by Josh Stein, who you mentioned is running for lieutenant governor. It's a very Democratic district. 2 Democrats are running. Ellis Hankins, a longtime head of the League of Municipalities, a Raleigh lawyer. Jade Chadry, an Asian American, a lawyer who's worked for both Roy Cooper and Janet Cowell. This will be very interesting, very close. 2 other Wake County races. One is an incumbent, Rosa Gill, who's been in the legislature several terms. She has 2 challengers, one of whom is Bernard Allen II, who ran in 2012 and whose father actually held that seat, which makes it sort of interesting. By far the most interesting House primary, though, is House District 36, the Republican primary in Wake County. Nelson Dollar has been in the legislature 6 terms, a House budget chair. Has been opposed by Mark Villey, who's, I think that's how you pronounce his name, I apologize if not, a small businessman. He's running to the right of Nelson Dollar, probably an independent expenditure by Raleigh businessman Bob Luddy. This is a very heated primary. The winner of that primary will face the winner of a Democratic primary, Jennifer Farrell, a mother and education advocate, against Woody Cleary, who's a cybersecurity expert in the Department of Revenue.
All right, we're going to take
Jennifer Farrell is sort of the liberal establishment's candidate.
All right, I wanted you to catch your breath because we're going to take a break and we'll be back with more legislative races in a moment.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Your family physician knows your health is more than just having a personal relationship with your doctor. You must have access to clean water. You need a place to exercise like our wonderful state parks. And we must ensure the healthcare and research workforce of the future. The North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians believes that when it comes to good health, we are all in this together. That's why we support the Connect NC bonds. Vote yes to invest on March 15th and vote for the Connect NC bond.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Let's prepare our state for the future by supporting the Connect NC bond. The bond will fund smart investments in education, agriculture, state parks, our National Guard, and infrastructure projects, creating job opportunities, strengthening our workforce, and driving innovation. It's a timely investment and a smart one for North Carolina families. On March 15th, stand with Farm Bureau and vote for the Connect NC bond.
We continue our look at the Tuesday primary elections. Chris Fitzsimon was talking about elections in Wake and the Piedmont part of the state when we interrupted him so rudely.
That's all right.
Pick it back up.
I'll just give you two more Senate districts in the Piedmont. Senate District 33, which is currently held by Republican Senator Stan Bingham, who's retiring. It's Davidson and Montgomery counties. Three Republicans are vying for the GOP nomination, Kathy Dunn, Joe Kennedy, and Eddie Gallimore. Kathy Dunn is a Davidson County Commissioner. Joe Kennedy is a longtime federal law enforcement officer. And Gallimore has run against Bingham in the primary in the last two elections. Senate District 36, Cabarrus and Union, that's currently held by a longtime Republican Fletcher Hartzell, who's not running again. There are four Republicans in this race: a Navy veteran Parrish Moffitt, who's sort of the Tea Party candidate, an anesthesiologist Scott Allmiller, former Duke Energy State President for North Carolina Paul Newton, and educator Amy Blake. And remember, we've talked about it, there is no runoff. So if you have one like Parrish Moffitt or anybody who has a lot of support from one constituency, there's no second chance. So they'll be fascinating to watch.
There are two Democrats in that race also.
But it is a Republican district.
All right. Any other, how about House District 26, Leo Daughtry's seat? We got two Republicans running in there, don't we?
Right. Donna McDowell White is a nurse. She's a member of the Johnson County School Board, and Dennis Nielsen, who actually ran against Daughtry 2 years ago in the primary.
Well, next week, obviously, we're going to do a recap of what happened. I want to go around the table and ask everybody to give me your prediction of how big a turnout we will have in the primary elections. John, I'll start with you.
I think the turnout will be very strong, and it'll be driven by the presidential race.
Percentage-wise, what will it be?
I don't know exactly what percent. I think it'll be higher than average, higher than average.
All right. Henry?
Strong and Trump.
Chris?
I think it'll be one of the highest presidential primary turnouts we've had, especially if the Democratic primary is perceived as competitive.
Rufus?
Long lines, 40%.
40%.
Mad people.
That was the percentage I was going to give because I think it's going to be a huge turnout. What's going to be the thing that turns them out? I got 20 seconds. What's the issue?
Being mad.
On the Republican side, it's all about how close is Ted Cruz going to get to Donald Trump. That's the whole issue.
Are any other issues that are going to be on their mind?
Well,
I think that nails it.
I do too, and I think although it'll be interesting to see if Bernie Sanders can make some sort of competitive run, he is a huge underdog here.
There's no question about that. All right. Well, as I say, next week we're going to do it all. A recap. Well, you've heard our spin on Tuesday's election. Stay informed all during the week. Give your feedback and read my weekly column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And join us next week when we only the election outcomes we'll tell you about, but also why the candidates run. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.